The TV show m.a.s.h ran for 11 years, 8 years longer than the war upon which it was based. It was ostensibly a comedy, but as the series went on, it leaned further and further into the drama aspect of the show and would find a more sombre tone. After all, the personnel of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital were dealing with the emotional tension of draftees and volunteers for a conflict known in the States as the Forgotten War. While concentrating on the Korean War of the early 50s, m.a.s.h's preceding movie and early seasons were broadcast during a time when the Vietnam War was very much ongoing. As such, the programme's discourse under the cover of comedy would sometimes grapple with America's place and role in the Cold War. But anyway, here's the m.a.s.h tie-in video game by Fox Video Games Incorporated. Look, you can bash helicopters together and play a variation of Operation with a man shaped like Grimace from McDonald's. Top larks. So yeah, m.a.s.h was originally a 1970 movie directed by Robert Altman based on a novel. It was a critical and commercial success, which saw Fox execs commission a TV show. Altman hated the show, calling it the antithesis of what we were trying to do with the movie. You see, the characters in the movie were often cruel in their japes, a counterpoint coping mechanism to the horrors they'd experienced from their day-to-day tasks of repairing brutalised and mangled bodies. However, the show, while featuring the same characters and setting, went for a more sedate, caring tone. Only Gary Burgov, who played Raider O'Reilly, transferred from the big screen to the small, although, as previously stated, a lot of the characters from the movie returned played by different actors. So popular was the show that the final episode, Goodbye, Farewell and Amen, remains as the most watched episode of a television show in the United States, with an estimated 105,970,000 viewers according to the Nielsen ratings. When you consider that it's 12th in the all-time telecasts in America ratings, and that the entirety of that list, apart from this episode, is Super Bowl broadcast, that is an astonishing figure, even more so when you remove the Super Bowl broadcasts entirely. Look how it compares to things like the Gulf War coverage and some of the presidential debates. So yes, the Atari 2600 game. The game came out shortly after the show finished and was released by Fox Video Games Incorporated and developed in-house. Fox Video Games Incorporated, which has no connection to the later Fox Interactive, was part of Fox's attempt to diversify its portfolio of multimedia products at the peak of the initial popularity of the video games boom in 1982. They released original titles, but also games based on their existing intellectual properties, games such as Alien, Flash Gordon, The Fantastic Voyage, and the previously covered Porky's. Fox Video Games Incorporated behaved very much like a fox in your garden, getting easily spooked and running away when the US video game crash occurred. And, well, much like that fox in the garden that's probably dead now, it never returned. At the time of the game's release, though, Fox were all in on this release, and rightly so, given the insane viewing figures the television show had accrued. As well as this release on the 2600, the game was also ported to the Atari computers, the VIC-20, the ColecoVision, the Intellivision, and the Texas Instruments 99, or the US Grandad range of computers and consoles. Fox really pushed the title even compared to the other games in their range. It was given the banner of Games of the Century, and actors from the show promoted the title to the press. The Atari 2600 version was available to purchase with or without a large 4077th t-shirt, but also the ability to buy more of those t-shirts, or even one if you decided against it initially. Perhaps if you were envious of your m.a.s.h t-shirt owning friends strutting about the place in their Korean War surgeon shirts, getting admiring looks from 80s girls with big old perms and bigger lusts. Not only that, but also included and this was indeed a sign of the times, was a competition to design a m.a.s.h sequel and win a $25,000 game designer contract. The prizes, other than the contract, were pretty extravagant, but as this happened right about the time of the crash, it is not known if the prizes were ever claimed, but what is known is that m.a.s.h 2 never appeared and Fox Games Incorporated spirited away into the ether of non-existence. So there was a lot of hubbub about this title, but actually playing it, you can see why the US crash might have happened. If a lot of the Atari games were like this in that oversaturated market, I can totally see why it wasn't sustainable over there. You see, m.a.s.h is all mouth and no trousers. It is a 1 to 2 player competitive game that sees you stationed at the 477th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital during the Korean conflict. There are just 2 stages to play. There are stricken soldiers in this field, and you'll need to collect them all, bringing them back to the safety of the hospital tent, where your surgical team can reinsert their gubbins so they can return home, all traumatised and heavily scarred from their warring endeavours. You'll be under fire from the Korean forces as you do this, so be sure to drive in between their artillery rounds. Once your helicopter is full of groaning shrapnel victims, you can drop off the wounded and head off to get some more. You're also in competition with the other helicopter, who wishes to get more mangled army men than you, in what would be a pretty decent setup to a privatised healthcare satirical bit, if I was witty enough to come up with one. The idea is to better the score of your opponent, and once the fields are completely cleared of the stricken, it's on to the next level. And well, the rations must be generous, eh? Look at the saddlebags on this big old unit. You can probably guess the premise. It's a cross between Milton Bradley's Operation and those wire buzzer games you get at the fair. You've got to guide the shrapnel chunks through these deep contusions in your patient. It looks relatively simple, but the limited nature of the control actually makes it incredibly difficult. You see, it's hard to get your head around where your tweezers are and the bit of shrapnel is, and where the walls inside of your patient are aligned to. Also, these sections are incredibly short and they take you by surprise, with one mistake instantly returning you to the helicopter stage, and even if you do a decent job of it, the levels themselves are about 15 seconds. The helicopter stages are more successful in what they're trying to do, and you can buff it around your opponent with your helicopter, which makes it more interesting to play against an opponent, even if it makes the scope of what you're trying to do, save wounded infantrymen, a bit against the spirit of the show. These 2 levels will loop several times, with the winner the person with the most points, and then you're dumped unceremoniously back at the beginning of the game for another go round. It's all frightfully rudimentary, even by Atari 2600 standards. Just 2 levels on repeat, with one of those levels lasting less than 20 seconds. While the pure arcade gameplay of the helicopter level is a fair distraction, the surgery levels are just really poorly realised. Suicide might be painless, but this game isn't. Electronic Fun with Computers and Games reviewed m.a.s.h in August 1983, and they gave it a 3.5 out of 4. And they said that the TV show was about the triumph of human spirit over the inhumanity of war. Take away the humans we know and love, and you've got a heartless trivialisation of a gruesome international war. Case in point, in this game, if you botch surgery, your competitor gets points. That said, and social responsibility aside, this is a terrific game. CMVG reviewed the Texas Instruments version in June 1985, and they gave it an 8 for playability and said that the helicopter graphics and sound were well simulated, and it should prove popular with all m.a.s.h fans. It's not for me though, but maybe I'm looking at it with a perspective of an additional 42 years. So, I don't know. With that in mind, something more recent, although it's still 26 years old, as we rock up, lubed and ready, at Chef's Love Shack. Like, subscribe, and K, thanks, bye.